Okay, so we've been multiplying. We're now going to get to what I think is a really fun part. We're going to get to factor. So we're going to start off today by factoring out the greatest common factor, and then later we're going to factor by grouping. So to factor out the greatest common factor, all you have to do is reverse distributive property. So let's look at the distributive property. Distributive property. 3 times 2x plus 5. If I distribute that, I get 6x plus 15, right? So now what we're going to do is we're going to start with this, and we're just going to find the greatest common factor from now on, which will be referred to as the GCF. We're going to find the GCF of all the terms. So if I look at both of these, what can they both be divided by? Well, they can both be divided by a 3. So we're going to go backwards. We're going to start here, and we're going to go there. That's what I mean. Okay, so let's look at this. Look at number 1. And what I like to do is look at the numbers first. Look at 5 and 10. What can they both be divided by? 5, exactly. So my greatest common factor is 5. Now when I look at the variables, okay, so when I look at the variables, for the greatest common factor, it has to be the same variable, and I have to take, when I'm finding the greatest, I have to take the lowest exponent. So to find the greatest common factor, I have to find the same variable and the lowest exponent for the variable. For the numbers, just look to see what's the biggest number that goes into it. For the variable, same variable, lowest exponent. So when I look at this, they both have an x, yay. What's my lowest exponent? 1. Because I can't take an x to the third out of an x. You can't take something out of there if it's not there. Now what I'm going to do, and I won't put a 1 there, I'll just put an x, but you get the idea. I'm going to factor that. So what I'm doing is I'm actually taking and dividing by x, 5x on both of these. If I take 5 divided by 5, I get 1. I can put it there or not. X cubed divided by x. Oh, let's remember, if I divide like bases, okay, I subtract exponents. Okay, so I'm going to divide like bases. I'm going to x cubed divided by x. I get 3 minus 1, which is x squared. 10 divided by 5 is 2. X divided by x cancels out. I'm done. That's my answer. I have factored out the greatest common factor. Okay, let's look at the next one. Greatest common factor. Well, look at the numbers, 2, 10, and 6. They're all divisible, so this was x. They're all divisible by 2. Now let's look at the variables. Do they all have an x? Yes, they do. Go back, look at the lowest exponent, just x. So I'm going to take and divide each term by 2x. Now, what I am doing right here, you will eventually probably not do that, but for now it just makes it easier to see. And you can always do it, not a problem. 2 divided by 2 is 1. X to the 4th divided by x. Remember, when I divide, I subtract my exponents. 4 minus 1 is 3. 10 divided by 2 is 5. X squared divided by x. When I divide, I subtract exponents. 6 divided by 2 is 3. The x's cancel. Done. Okay? Good. Try number 3. Go. Try it. Pause yours. Go. So for number 3, you found out the greatest common factor. Hopefully you already figured out it's 5. And there's no y. They don't all have a y. I can't take a y out. So all I'm going to do is divide through by a 5. That's all I can do. That's my greatest common factor. I'm going to get y cubed minus 3y plus 6. Okay? Want to try number 4? Go. So in number 4, greatest common factor, 5 and 9. 1 is the greatest common factor as far as the number. So we need to keep that in mind. 1 would be the greatest common factor. We don't usually write it down. So now I look at my variables. Greatest common factor is x. Lowest exponent is 1. So I'm going to divide every single term by x. Now, I do have a 1 out here. We usually just don't put it in, but that is a 1x as the greatest common factor. Okay, so 1x is our greatest common factor, and when we divide through by x, we get 5 minus 9x squared. Okay? Now on number 5, you're going to look and think at this and go, okay, Phipps really is crazy now. She is now making us factor out boxes. But I want you to see what's happening here. Okay, on this one, see how they both have the box? That is my greatest common factor. I'm going to actually factor out a box. If I factor out the box, what do I have left? I have 7 plus 2x. Yes? Okay, there's a point to this. Stay with me. Stay with me. Look at number 6. Number 6, if I put a box around this, do you see how those are both the same? So what happens is my greatest common factor is actually a binomial. My greatest common factor is a binomial. So if I factor out the box, here, my box, I'm going to be this obnoxious, my box is going to be 3x minus 5. That's what I'm factoring out. What do I have left? If I divide by the 3x minus 5, I'm going to have a 2x plus 7. I'm stuck on 2's and 7's, I guess. Okay, so my answer is 3x minus 5 times 2x plus 7. So I'm doing the box just to emphasize. Sometimes it's going to be a whole little group. It's going to be a parenthesis. So let's look at this one. Do you notice that what's in the parentheses is exactly the same? That's what I'm going to factor out. That, view it, that as the box. So what's my greatest common factor? 5x plus 2. Well, if I divide by 5x plus 2, notice I have an x left, and I have a 9x left. Okay, I'm factoring out the box. Try this one. This one, let me give you one hint. See how there's nothing there? Put a 1. Put a 1. Okay? So my greatest common factor? X minus 4. What do I have left? 8x plus 1. Okay? If there's no number there, I can stick a 1 in there. Okay. If you were in class right now, I'd ask you questions and see if you want to go over any more of those. This is factoring out the greatest common factor. Now we're going to talk about factoring by grouping, and this will always be 4 terms. We're going to factor by grouping, okay? So what I'm going to do is, what I like to do is to do a problem at the same time that I am doing the steps. So here are the steps. We're going to factor this one out right down here. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to divide it into 2 pairs. Now, this first step I'm going to do, I will only do it this first time. From then on, I'm just going to look at the 2 pairs. So I'm going to just give it a little space. So I have x cubed plus 3x squared, and I have 2x plus 6. So I'm looking at the 2 pairs, okay? Now I'm going to factor out the greatest common factor of each pair. Greatest common factor of each pair. So look at this pair. What's my greatest common factor? Well, the number is 1. Don't have to worry about that. They both have an x. What's my lowest exponent? 2. Okay, so I'm going to divide out by x squared. I'm going to move that down so I have a little more space. I'm going to factor out x squared. When I factor out an x squared, I'm dividing both of these by an x squared. I get x cubed minus x squared is x. 3x squared divided by x squared is 3. Okay? Now let's look at this pair. What's my greatest common factor? 2, that's right. So I'm going to divide both of these by a 2, and I get x plus 3, right? Well, watch this. You're going to think I'm doing magic, but look what's in the parentheses. This will happen every time, okay? And that's the reason I say make sure what is in the parentheses is the same. Make sure what is in the parentheses is the same. Is it the same? Yes, it is. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to factor out the greatest common factor again, which will be what is in the parentheses. Okay, so if I get here, if I don't have the same thing in the parentheses, I've done something wrong. It's kind of like directions, if you've ever had somebody give you directions someplace, and they say, if you get to, let's say, if you get to Target, you've gone too far. So if you're going along on Pryor Road, and if you get to Target, you've gone too far, go back. You've done something wrong. That's the same as this. If you get to this point, and what's in the parentheses is not the same, you've done something wrong. Okay, we did something right. We got x plus 3. Now this goes back to that box. So if I have this box right here that is the same, I can take that out. So what do they have the same? X plus 3. What do I have left over? If I divide by an x plus 3, I just have an x squared left. If I divide by an x plus 3, I have a 2 left. I have this factored by grouping. We're going to do more of those. Oh, now, this step 4 is going to come in later. I'm going to just write the notes in now so I don't forget. If the third term is negative, so I'm talking about this term right here. If it is negative, then you must factor out a negative. Okay, if the third term, if this one is negative. We'll get to those, I promise. Don't worry about it. Okay, let's go to the next page. We're just going to practice, practice, practice. So, have those notes, maybe right out in front of you right here. Okay, we have the notes. We don't need that fourth step right now, so we're going to look at it. Divide into pairs. So what you're going to do is you're going to look at the first two, and you're going to look at the last two. If you want to begin with, write them out, kind of space them apart, if that helps. But we're going to look at the pairs. We're going to look at this pair, and we're going to look at this pair. If I look at this pair, what's my greatest common factor? Okay, I'm going to take out my greatest common factor of each pair. What's my greatest common factor? 5. Do they both have an x? Yes. So I'm going to divide out a 5x. So 10 divided by 5 is 2. X squared divided by x is x. Remember, you can always just write it right underneath it. Now I'm going to take 5 divided by 5. That's 1. X divided by x, is gone. So that's just 1. Okay? Let's look at this pair. Greatest common factor. Bring that plus down. Greatest common factor is 2. If I divide both of these by a 2, I have 2x plus 1. And this is where it's really cool. Watch. What's in parentheses is exactly the same. That means we did it right. We're going to factor out that box. We're going to factor out that binomial. So we're going to take a 2x plus 1 out. What do I have left? Well, if I divide through by 2x plus 1, don't I have a 5x left? And don't I have a 2 left? Now on this one, you could actually multiply it and see if it gave you that answer. On this one, you would have to combine like terms in order to get the answer that this one's going to get. But if you multiply this out, you'll get the same thing. Let's just do it. Let's just multiply it out. I get 2x times 5x is 10x squared. 2x times 2, 4x. 1 times 5x is 5x. 1 times 2 is 2. Ta-da! Look at that. I ended up with the exact same thing I started with. I know it's right. So that's one of the cool things, is you can find out if you're right before you even go on. Okay. Are you ready to try one on your own? Oh, not this one. Sorry. Not this one. We'll find some to try on our own. Let's look at it in pairs. Greatest common factor, 4x squared minus 20x. Exactly, 4x. So I take 4x squared divided by 4x, I get an x. 20 divided by 4 is 5. The x's cancel. And again, you can write it right underneath. That might help. Okay, now let's look at this pair. What do they have the same? 1x minus 5. Nothing. They have nothing the same. So if you ever say to yourself they have nothing the same, that means you're going to factor out a 1. So if you look at it and you're like, okay, the numbers don't divide anything by the same thing. They don't both have a variable. My greatest common factor is 1. So if I divide by 1, don't I just get x minus 5? And look, it's the same thing in parentheses. Ta-da! That means that's our greatest common factor. What do I have left? 4x plus 1. Yes? Questions? I wish you were in the room so I could answer those questions. We will do some more that we practice in just a bit. We'll look at the assignment. Okay, here we go. We're going to divide it in pairs. Look at that first pair. What's the greatest common factor? X. That's right. Divide them both by an x. I get 3x minus 2. And again, you can always divide by x. Just put it right there. Okay? Good. Now, warning sign, warning sign, warning sign. Third term is a negative. When the third term is a negative, what does it say we need to do? We need to factor out a negative. So what's going to happen here is we're going to take out a negative, whatever it is. So greatest common factor between 6 and 4 is 2. I'm going to factor out a negative. I'm going to divide both of these by a negative 2. When I do that, negative 6x, because that's a negative 6x divided by negative 2, that's a 3x. When I take 4 divided by negative 2, I get a negative 2. Do I have the same thing in the parentheses? So that means I did it right. But I have to factor out a negative. All the other ones were positives, So we didn't have to worry about it. But when that third term is a negative, I have to take out a negative number. I find the greatest common factor, but I have to take out a negative. So what do they have in common? The box, 3x minus 2. What do I have left? X minus 2. Multiply that out, and you get the same thing. Here we go. Factor out the greatest common. Oh, do you want to try this one? This one's kind of tricky. But feel free to try it on your own. Pause it if you want to. Greatest common factor, 2x. 2 divided by 2, 1. X squared divided by x, x. 6 divided by 2, 3. X divided by x, gone. Third term is a negative. Warning sign, warning sign. Okay, third term is a negative, so I have to take out a negative. What is my greatest common factor? Nothing. So when I have nothing as greatest common factor, what do I take out? 1. Because I do have 1 in common, so it's not nothing. Now, be very careful here. You're dividing both of these by a negative. Negative x divided by negative 1 and negative 3 divided by negative 1. I'm going to get x plus 3. Yay! What's in the parentheses is the same. That's my greatest common factor, x plus 3. What do I have left? 2x minus 1. Okay? Questions? Oh, I wish you were here. I could answer your questions. Let's look at the next page. Okay, here we're going to find the greatest common factor. So that's just practicing finding the greatest common factor. And again, if you're in class, I would probably do one with you. Do any of them look difficult to me? This one might look difficult. Notice they all have a 2. And they all have an n. Oops, I wrote that parentheses too soon. N squared. Divide them all by 2n squared. If you want to pause your screen and try that on your own. Okay. This one, you're going to factor out each polynomial by taking out the greatest common factor. So take out the greatest common factor for each one of those. Okay? Good. Factor out each expression. This is where you're going to factor by grouping. Wow. Which one looks difficult to me? There's not a lot of space on here. Okay? So let's look at 2 of them at a time. They both have a 3. They'll both have a y squared. So 9 divided by 3 is 3. Okay? Here, third term is a negative. Take out a negative. They both are divisible by 6. So I get, dividing by 6, negative 6, I get a 3y minus 4. And notice what is in parentheses is the same. What do I have left? 3y squared minus 6. We're just going to leave it like that for now. This one can be factored a little further, but we'll worry about that later on. Okay, so if you have questions, you know where to find us. Thank you very much. We are going to do a second day on this, so you're going to see more practice on this in the next lesson.